Hello, YouTube. Mr. Max here. Today, we'll be asking the question, what if every Pokemon region had a fighting type gym leader? Now, the fighting type is one of the types that is tied for the most gym leaders across the entire franchise at six different gym leaders. In fact, if you count gym leaders, Elite Four members, and other special trainers like villain team leaders and just other significant trainers like that, the only Pokemon game that does not have any kind of fighting specialist at all is Pokemon Shield. Not Gen 8, not Sword and Shield, just Shield, because at least Sword has Bea, B, whatever you say her name, but since the fourth gym in Shield is Alistair, that is the only Pokemon game that does not have a fighting specialist. Every other game has at least one gym leader, Elite Four member, or special trainer like Aerie in Scarlet and Violet. But even though there are a ton of other significant trainers that are fighting type specialists, there are still a good number of fighting types that have never really gotten much spotlight. So I thought today I would remedy that by creating new fighting type gym leaders for every single region. So starting off with the criteria for how I develop these teams. The gym leader team and position will be chosen based on the fighting Pokemon native to the region. So I'll be specifically looking at the new fighting types that were introduced in the region and building teams primarily focused on those. And I'll also be specifically making choices. A lot of videos like this will say, oh, here are the four or five best fighting types. That'll be the eighth gym in the region. You can kind of work backwards from there. But I want to specifically make choices. There will be some times when I do make multiple teams, but in those cases, I'll say which one I personally like the best. I'll use the version of the region with the most options, Platinum for Sinnoh, Black and 2 for Unova, etc. I will not be reusing aces of any canon fighting type gym leaders or Elite Four members in the region unless necessary. So, for example, Machamp will not be used on any team in Kanto or Johto since he is on the Ace of Brunos in both of those games. But someone like Gallade over in Sinnoh is fair game since all other Pokemon from all other major trainers are fair game. And since Gallade is the eighth of a psychic gym leader, that is fair game. And I'm only counting Elite Four members and gym leaders. So once again, Aerie, her ace, Annihilate could work on a gym leader since she herself is not actually a gym leader. And lastly, the gym leader's overall strength will be based on the canon gym leaders of the region in question, if not slightly stronger. So I tried to keep the average base stat total similar to that in any given region. So for example, if I made the Hoen gym leader, if I made that one the fourth gym, I would have the average base stat total be similar to Flannery's probably from Emerald. But especially in the regions like Unova and Kalos, where their teams only cap at three Pokemon. They don't have any Mega Evolutions and like that, just that kind of thing. I will probably add an extra Pokemon or just kind of make their team overall stronger just because I feel those games could warrant a little more difficulty. But that'll come by a case-by-case basis. Okay, so let's move on to the first region, Kanto. Starting off, I think this could work really well as the fourth gym, and it's a double battle with with one trainer having Machop and Hitmonlee, and the other with Mankey and Hitmonchan. I think this works very well. Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan already have, are already counterparts in this way, so I think it only makes sense since this Crush Kin uh, character type is here in Leaf Green Fire Red, might as well incorporate that into an actual gym leader. I know there aren't double battles typically in any of the Gen 1 games, especially in Kanto specifically, but if I'm canning this more so as a Leaf Green Fire Red or a Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee game where double battles did exist. But because double battles didn't actually exist in those original games, even though I think this is probably the most ideal version of a fighting gym in Kanto, I did make another one. And that is the sixth gym, and this is essentially headcanon as the fighting dojo master reclaiming his position as an actual gym leader. In fact, in the sixth gym city, as he actually is with Sabrina, who's kind of technically the sixth gym, depending on how you count. But he is actually the sixth gym now, with Primeape, Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, and Poliwrath as his ace. This is essentially him using all the Pokemon that he has ever used or is associated with throughout the various games. Because I know in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, I'm pretty sure he had a team of Primeape and Poliwrath. Then he obviously gave away Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan. So all the Pokemon that he has used or owned, he actually uses in this gym fight. So again, I think this double battle with a lead with a ace Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan is the most ideal version of this fighting gym in Kanto, but I really like the idea of the fighting dojo master reclaiming his position as the sixth gym. Now for Johto, now Johto is infamous for barely using any Gen 2 Pokemon, and Chuck in this region is no exception. The whole rule about not using not using canon aces wasn't really a problem here since his ace was Poliwrath for some reason, and his other Pokemon was Primeape. Granted, the only other new fighting types added were Hitmonlee, who was on Bruno's team later, and Heracross, who was nowhere. So I actually think that the Johto fighting type gym had a more or less correct idea to have only two Pokemon, but I think you bring it down one tier to be the fourth gym with him on top and Heracross as the ace. I think this makes a lot of sense. I think by the fourth gym, if the Pokemon are strong enough, you can potentially get away with only two. Ideally, maybe you throw on a Mankey or a Machop. Like there weren't a lot of other options to really pull from that early on in the series, but I think Hitmontop and Heracross together, especially if they're a little stronger than Morty's ace usually is, like around level 27 or something like that. I think this could pass for a pretty solid fourth gem, if for no other reason than just to, give someone Heracross. Now for Hoenn, I think this works well in the seventh gym with Medicham, Heracross again. Again, there weren't that many other fighting types. I think Macho was the only other fighting type you could really pull from. Breloom and Hariyama. Now, Hariyama was a very interesting case because the fighting gym leader in Hoenn, his ace Pokemon when you fight him as a gym leader is Makuhita, not Hariyama. So by the rules I've set out and also logic I've used in previous videos in the series, Hariyama is fair game, and I think he is bulky enough and strong enough to work as the ace of a seventh gym. I could even hear an argument for this maybe even being strong enough to be an eighth gym. Maybe like all these Pokemon just hit super hard. They're relatively fast, especially if you added on a Macho onto this team, which I'm pretty sure is the only other fighting type outside of Combuskin. But I always feel a little weird about giving gym leaders starter Pokemon. So I think this works as the seventh gym, especially with just how many flying and psychic type Pokemon you can find throughout the region. I think this works as a seventh gym. But I did want to bend the rules ever so slightly because even though I think this is the best gym you can create given my rules, just looking at all of the fighting types in Hoenn, I think it could work very well as the third gym with Meditite, Makuhita, and then Breloom as the ace. Something in my head just really likes Breloom being the third gym ace. I also did that in the grass video. And if Brawley were one gym up, obviously Makuhita would then be way too weak to be the ace at that point. It works as the second gym just because it's deceptively bulky for a first form Pokemon like that. But if he was one gym later with the third gym, I think this would just work very well as a nice third gym roadblock. Now for Sinnoh, it just makes sense to be the eighth gym. I know I make a lot of the Sinnoh gym leaders in this series eighth gyms, but they just have a lot of really good Pokemon to pull from. I wanted Gallade to be the ace here, and I didn't really feel like it made sense for him to be the ace any earlier. So the team I made here is Toxicroak, Machamp, Medicham, and Gallade. It's a little unfortunate that we have two fighting psychic types here, but it's fine. You gotta do what you gotta do. There weren't that many other fighting types to pull from. And weirdly, Medicham like seems to almost be associated more with Sinnoh than Hoenn anyway. Like in the what game is it? It's Heart Gold Soul Silver. I think of Heart Gold Soul Silver when you're playing the Sinnoh music in certain routes, it can draw in Meditite, even though they're clearly a Hoenn Pokemon. But I guess maybe there's some lore about them originating from Sinnoh or something. But regardless, they just seem to be more associated, definitely more findable in Sinnoh. So they work on a Sinnoh team. And this is the one instance of Machamp being on any of these teams, as far as I remember. Um, a common trend with fighting uh, fighting trainers across the entire franchise is a lot of them, if not the vast majority of them, use someone in the Machamp line, and I wanted to refrain from doing that as much as possible. So I did one in Kanto, which makes sense. They're from Kanto, and then another one here just because I wanted this to be the eighth gym and need another strong fighting type. So Machamp. I could have put Heracross there, but then that'd be three Heracrosses in a row. So, and I hadn't used Machamp yet, so here you go, Machamp. But I think it also works well as the third gym, like Maylene actually is, kind of technically, depending on how you count. But with Riolu, Meditite, and Toxicroak as the ace. I couldn't use Lucario for either of these teams, obviously, since he was Maylene's ace. But I think Riolu has enough merit on its own to warrant being on an early-ish gym team. And the Toxicroak makes sense as the ace. Now for Unova, this is another instance where we have two fighting types that are that come in a pair like this with throw and sock. And one of these like Rough Rider Biker people, I think one or both of them have used fighting types on their uh encounter table in the past. So I think that only made sense for them to represent a double battle fighting gym in Unova. So we have one team with me and Fu and Sock, and another one with Timber and Throw. I kind of like the idea of one of them being more like, you know, being a little more direct with their attacks, and the other one just kind of feeling a little more bulky. So yeah, I dig this a lot. It works. I think it works well as the fourth gym. The average base stat total is similar to that of Elisa's, and actually it's a little weaker than her, but because it is a double battle and double battles are inherently a little, if not maybe not more challenging, but definitely more complicated, I think it works for this to be slightly weaker overall. Plus, I didn't put two fighting gems here. Maybe you could get away with both of them having a fighting gym. Actually, I would probably do that if I just didn't think to give them to visually have them both have fighting gyms. But like I've said in previous videos, I genuinely believe that if Game Freak had the idea of doing in-game battle mechanics one generation earlier, they absolutely would have used those type boosting gems as this game's battle mechanic. So just like how Tate and Liza, both of their aces have citrus berries, I think it would make sense for Throw and Sock to both have a fighting gem. It would just be powering up like low sleep or something kind of weak like that. So I think it would be fine. But I also think if you think the double battle is a little too far-fetched since there weren't any other double battle gym leaders in Unova, I think it could work well as a sixth gym with Sock, Throw, and Scrafty as the ace, again having that fighting gym. Now, Scrafty isn't really the fastest Pokemon, but with that Moxie ability, if it can get going, it can ramp up quickly, especially with throw and or sock using low sweep on you. If you are able to, to use one Pokemon to beat both of them, because sock has the sturdy ability, so unless you're using a multi-hit attack, you're guaranteed to not one-shot it. So it's almost guaranteed to hit you with one low sweep. So it lowers your speed. And then throw, since it's so bulky, you might not be able to one-shot it either. And then by the time Scrafty comes out, your one Pokemon you beat those two with is so slow that Scrafty and potentially so weak that Scrafty cannot speed it, beat you with some powered up fighting move or some dark move, beat you, get that Moxie boost, and then it if you have nothing that can really handle it, it can kind of run through your team that way. Especially if your plan was to go through with Psychic types, Crafty's immune to Psychic. So I think this synergizes very well. Now for Kalos, this one was interesting because I kind of went into this with a similar mindset that I did for the bug gem I made in the bug video, where there was only one new bug type available in the Kalos region. So I essentially, for at least one of the teams I made, I just did Vivian and then had three other Pokemon that are capable of Mega Evolution, and then had one of them actually Mega Evolve. So I did something similar here where I specifically, since I can't use Halucha, since uh, that is already used on a gym leader in this region, the only other option is Pangoro. So I had Pangoro as the ace, and then three other fighting types that can Mega Evolve. So we have Medicham, Lucario, and I chose Mega Heracross. I think if Game Freak were making this team, it would totally be Mega Lucario as the Mega here, but I really like Mega Heracross. And I used Mega Lucario, I believe, in the Steel video. So since I've used Mega Lucario before and I didn't use Mega Heracross in the bug one, I wanted to spotlight Mega Heracross here. Yeah, I just like the idea of this character, using a strong fighting type from this region, and then three other fighting types that are capable of mega evolving. Now for Alola, I think one of the teams I made works as the eighth gem with Passimian, Hakamo'o, Hariyama, and Beware. It's a little weird even that Komao wasn't on Hala's team. I know that Komao was a totem Pokemon, but I don't know. It still feels like if you're in the Elite Four, you can bend the rules a little bit to have totem Pokemon, especially since I feel like Komao is. I know they didn't know this at the time, but Komao I feel is one of the least remembered, definitely least iconic pseudo legendary. So having it be the ace of a fighting Elite Four member would have been cool, but because Hakamo'o is a fighting type, I think it makes sense for it to be the on a gym leader's team. I wouldn't want to give a gym leader a pseudo legendary as an ace, but fully evolved pseudo, but having a Hakamo'o on the team, I think works. And that Simeon and Beware are two other fighting types that are named to the region, and I think Hariyama just kind of rounds out the team here. But I did create one other that is the third gem with Stuffle, Scraggy, and Passimian as the ace. I think Passimian is right on that level of being like, if it were even like one or two gems later, I don't think Passimian could really work super well as the ace. But for a third gem, he honestly might be a little too strong. He has deceptively high attack and pretty good speed, and actually pretty good bulk too. It's a very solid Pokemon. Um, so the other two Pokemon, Stuffle and Scraggy, being relatively weak, I think kind of balances it out. Now for Galar, um, actually the whole not reusing aces didn't really matter in this because Bea didn't actually use a Galarian fighting type as her ace. She had a Gigantamax Machamp for some reason. So every fighting type is completely fair game here. So I made one team that is the eighth gem with all pure fighting types that look like they could be other types, with Graplocked, who looks like it could be a normal a water type. I don't know why it's not. Passimian, who I think looks like it could be a dark or a grass or a normal or some other thing, especially since it's a counterpart to a Rangaroo who is a dual type, and Passimian is just randomly pure fighting. Phalanx, who looks like it could be one of three other types, pretty much. It looks like it could be a combination of fighting, steel, and bug, and it's not steel or bug, it's just pure fighting somehow. How is that not steel? How is that not bug? I'll never understand how that thing is not weak to fire, but whatever. And then Surfetched, who is also very weird for not being part flying. They just, for some reason, got rid of both of Farfetch's types and just replaced it completely with fighting. So there were three different fighting types in this region that looked like they should be other types, except they're pure fighting for some reason. So I grabbed one other pure fighting type who I think could be argued probably should be another type with Passimian. So the Surfetched typically can't actually Mega Evolve, or well, it can't that either, but it can't definitely can't Gigantamax. But I genuinely think that both Surfetched and Cursola should Gigantamax. I think they both should have been the aces of Bea and Alistair, and I think they both should have had a Mega Evolution. I could just see just like a giant shield, an even bigger sword, just working very well for a G-Max Surfetched. So I'm saying that this Surfetched in the version of this game I'm creating has a Mega Evolution, or that whatever, has a Gigantamax form. But I also made one that's the first gym with Cobblepus and Galarian Farfetch'd. This honestly might be a little like too weak for the first gym. The first gym in Galar is like actually deceptively kind of good. It's only two Pokemon. They're both of the same evolutionary line, but I believe it's even still the highest level of any first gym leader. Eldegoss is kind of deceptively bulky, especially if you don't have anything that's super effective into it. So yeah, I think this could you could probably get away with adding one other Pokemon on here. I'm not exactly sure what that would be. Maybe, maybe a Riolu, maybe Machop, maybe. But yeah, I still think Galarian Farfetch'd is fine enough for a first gym. And lastly, we have Paldea. Now, in all of these videos for the Paldea ones, I create at least three teams to represent the three different ways that terrestrializing can be used. One, it's a Pokemon of their type that tears into their type to make those moves even stronger. One where it's a Pokemon of their type that tears into a different type to either be offensively or defensively into Pokemon that normally give their team trouble. And then lastly, a Pokemon not of their type that tears into their type to kind of mirror how the actual gym leaders have it, like how Sudowoodo tears into a grass type because people confuse it as a grass type, or how Miss Maggie is tears into an electric type to to benefit more from its levitate ability so that it, technically doesn't have any weaknesses anymore. So either some kind of thematic way or to go with some kind of strategy. So the first one here, I made the eighth gem with Paldean Tauros, the fire breed. Gallade, just because this is the first region that I think Gallade is. Like Gallade's always been a very good Pokemon, but this region made Gallade a monster with its sharpness ability and also Sacred Sword, which is bonkers. So I just wanted to spotlight just how good Gallade is in this game. And also Palmot to potentially do revival blessings if one of those two, came out first and fainted, and they could bring it back at half health. Plus, Palmot's pretty powerful and fast in its own right, and then Annihilate as the ace, tearing into that pure fighting type. Next, we have one that's the sixth gem with Flamigo, Primeape, not Annihilate, because I think that'd be too much for six, but I think Primeape could still work since it evolves into a Gen 9 Pokemon. We're keeping Palmot here. And now the Water Paldean Tauros tears into a Steel type. I like this a lot for many reasons. First, Tauros can learn several different steel type moves, Iron Head, Smart Strike, so it can get stabbed from those. Also, the main types that steel is weak to are fire and ground, and its secondary typing of water is good into those types. And its signature move, Raging Bull, I think it's called. Raging Bull keeps the type. The type is always associated with the form of the Tauros, not the type of the Tauros. So even if you Terra into Steel, it'll still be a water-based Raging Bull. So, you try to have a fire or a ground type against this thing, it can still hurt those super effectively. And for those fighting types, I think it would be fun if it was a bulk up body press set. So it can, and most fighting moves are physical. So even though fighting is not super effective against it, those moves are going to do increasingly less damage. So I think that just synergizes so well together. It is maybe a little awkward that I made the ace here a regional variant, but it just came together so nicely there that I think it's fine. And lastly, we have one that's the seventh gem with Flamigo, Paldean Tauros, just the regular, pure fighting one. Still keeping Palmon. I just like the idea of it revival blessing the rest of the team. And then Mudsdale that tears into a fighting type. I think this is just so perfect because Mudsdale is so dang bulky with its stamina ability, making it even more bulky, boosting its defense, and then having that Terra stab body press with probably at least one defense boost. I just think that also just synergizes very well. There weren't a lot of Pokemon I was even really considering. Fighting is one of those types where you either are or you aren't. There weren't there were like maybe two or three that I was also maybe thinking like maybe they could be argued to make kind of look like a fighting type, but none of them were clean enough. So I decided to go with a with an idea of the more strategy based one. So I went Mudsdale, getting those boosts so its body presses are stronger. Plus they can learn uh, a good amount of rock moves like Rock Slide, Stone Edge, etc. So anything that is, trying to tear through this team with flying attacks, you probably won't one shot it because it's bulk, and then also, take good amount of damage if not one shotting it with those rock moves as well. So yeah, I like all three of these teams quite a bit. Honestly, my favorite might be the sixth one. I really like the Gallade here along with Annihilate, just because I really like Annihilate also, but just the way this team with Paldea and Tauros, the water one, synergized very well. I like that a lot, and I even like the Mudsdale here too. So yeah, I honestly I'm torn about which of these I would like if I were, you know, actually making this. I'm not sure which one I would actually go with, but yeah, I'm really proud of all three of these teams here. All right, thank you so much for watching. Please let me know down below what you thought of any of these teams. Are there any fighting types I forgot about? Any that I made aces that didn't deserve it, or vice versa? Um, were there any teams that you thought were too strong or too weak for where they were? Do you disagree that I just kind of gave Surfetch a Gigantamax form? Yeah, please leave all of your thoughts, comments, criticism, concerns, all of that down below. I believe I only have two more of these videos to go before I complete all 18 types in this series. So I'm excited to continue the series, but I'm also really excited about some future ideas I have for after this series. But I still want to make those last two videos as good as possible. So please leave all your thoughts down below. It really does help me continue making this series as good as possible. So with all of that, I will see you all next time.